I went down that path very hard, very fast. I got all the things I thought I wanted, became popular, I had the boyfriend, I had the big friend group. I was also incredibly addicted to alcohol and then later drugs, incredibly unhappy. I went through periods of depression and suicide. I ended up doing the things I said I would never do, and I didn't get any closer to feeling accepted or loved.
Welcome to When You Look, where ordinary people share their extraordinary experiences, and you get to decide, was it coincidence or God?
Tindell Baldwin, welcome to When You Look.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
We are super pumped. You have an incredible story to tell with all kinds of really interesting ups and downs and sideways twists and turns and all of that. But before we jump in, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so yes, you have my book. So I'm an author. Long time ago, my oldest is 13 and Popular came out when she was in diapers. So I love that God continues to bring opportunities like this when it feels like, that's something in the past. But I'm a mom of 4, married for almost 17 years to my college sweetheart, Ben. And yeah, so most days I am at home taking care of the kids. I kind of work part-time writing and actually podcast producing. So this is just fun I get to have and that God keeps bringing my way. But yeah. Oh, and I'm in Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for all that insight. The book, everybody that's listening, we're going to link to it, of course, but it's called Popular, Booze, Boys, and Jesus, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. And folks, I have read the book and I can tell you it is a doozy in the best possible sense. So it is packed with wisdom coming from Jesus, wisdom coming from a lifetime of experience. And man, there was many a time as I read this that not only could I relate to a lot of it, but that I was also in tears as I read it. So for those of you listening, check it out. You're going to essentially get a little bit of a preview as Tindell and I kind of explore some of the arc of her life. So let's do exactly that. Give us a little bit of backstory, sort of where does Popular in a way begin for you in life, and walk us through things.
Yeah. Okay. So I was raised here in Georgia, honestly, about 15 minutes from where I currently live. And I was born into a big family. I am the third of 4. I have 3 brothers. And honestly, like great family situation, great childhood. Like there was no like trauma hiccups really it was just kind of like the all-American dream. Loved my family. And then kind of teenage years hit, and being the third, I kind of was looking around and didn't know where I fit in. Faith was a huge part of my family's upbringing. We went to a local church. We were there on Wednesdays. We were there on Sundays. My parents were the Bible study teachers, and my dad actually spoke at the youth group, and my brother was the worship leader. So church was deeply entrenched in every part of our family. My parents lived it out as well as taught it. And I kind of just didn't know where I fit. I think it's a little bit of like just the middle child syndrome. I feel like I'm like watching my middles going like, are you gonna, is it hard? Because it is as a middle child in a big family, you do kind of look around, you're like, where do I fit in here? And for me, faith was something my family did, but I wouldn't say I was like sold out to the Lord at an early age. Like my oldest is 13 and I watch her and how she carries herself and what she wants, what she's interested in. And she truly loves the Lord at an early age. Praise Jesus. I have 3 others that are still undecided. So it's not parenting, sadly. It's just when God captures them, when they're ready to surrender, really. And so I was not ready to surrender at an early age. What I honestly wanted, which is why the book is entitled this, is I wanted popularity. I wanted what it looked like it could give me, which was like stupid things, but the things that are important when you're 14, 15, popularity, a boyfriend, a friend group. I wanted to be included. I want to be invited to parties. My brothers are also overachievers. Still to this day, great overachievers. But like one of my brothers is 42 and still running 100-mile marathons. He's like the Uber athlete. And then another brother, a very famous worship leader. And then my youngest brother is also an incredible singer and talented. So I was kind of like, hey, I don't sing. I don't do sports. I just didn't really know where I fit. And I thought if I could be popular, I would feel kind of okay not fitting in my family. I would feel like I had a place. And again, it wasn't anything my family did. They were not pushing me to be anybody but me. So yeah, that was kind of my a run away a little bit from the church. I kind of decided I was done. I wrote a goodbye letter to God. I think I was either 14 or 15, but I was like, I looked at God like Santa Claus, and I talk about this in the book, but I was like, you're not giving me what I want. I've written you. I told you what I want. You're not giving it to me. I'm out. I'm going to go find it myself. And so I really just kind of chased what I saw on TV that looked so appealing. And what Satan really does lure you in with is like, oh, you'll feel good about yourself if. Yeah. So I went down that path very hard, very fast. I got all the things I thought I wanted. I became popular. I had the boyfriend. I had the big friend group. I was also incredibly addicted to alcohol and then later drugs. Incredibly unhappy. Went through periods of depression and suicide. I ended up doing the things I said I would never do. And I didn't get any closer to feeling accepted or loved. So that's like the kind of the overarch of the book and kind of what pushed me away from faith.
Yeah. And one of the phrases that you used was often wrong, but never in doubt. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, that's actually, my husband assigned me that phrase because, we heard it at church when we were married, but it is true. And it was true from a very young age. I was like very headstrong, very committed to whatever I was doing. So again, when I ran away from the Lord and ran towards, I was all in, and it didn't really matter that it didn't seem to be working out. I was bent on, running into the door over and over again instead of using the handle.
Yeah. And again, I'm not trying to pile on with this, but in the book, you were talking about how, if you were sort of using the parallel of a sheep here, if your coat wasn't white, if you were going to be the black sheep, essentially, you might as well dye it as black as you could. Sort of what you described.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I was like, well, I can't fit in to my family in my head. And again, now as a much more mature Christian, I think Satan probably was telling me, you don't fit in here. That's a lie. I do fit in. But I felt like it was true. And so, especially feelings are so powerful, right? We have teenagers. And when you're a teenager, it's like everything's either amazing or the end of the world. And it was the end of my world, not having popularity and the things that I thought. And I think, culture does a great job of selling you a lie. And I think it's way harder now because there's social media and there's so many examples of people that look so happy, right? And if you just get X, Y, Z, you'll be great. And I think what I found, but was very unwilling to admit, was by the end of high school, I was unhappier than I had ever been, and heartbroken from really poor decisions I had made in dating, and really left high school like so embarrassed of what I had done in 4 years and so ready to start over. So grateful for the chance to start over. In fact, most people told my parents are an incredible example of just the love of Christ. I think the only reason I actually ended up back at the feet of Jesus is because of my family, ironically enough. But I mean, everyone told my parents, don't let her go to Auburn. Like, she won't live. And they honestly had a reason to fear. And I asked my dad later, I'm like, how did you send me to college without fear? If it was my kid, I would have been so afraid. And he was like, I don't fear because I know who my savior is. He was like, why would you worry about the sun coming up tomorrow? He was like, God had you. I believed that. And he had a plan for you. And I was like, well, that really puts my faith in perspective.
Well, color in a little bit more as to what you were just saying, meaning that your parents kind of had in your mind, especially now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Reason to really fear you leaving high school and then going to a large, prominent college, right? So give folks a little bit
Yeah.
more in terms of like what was happening in high school and maybe even begin to bring us into a spring break trip to a Caribbean
Yes.
island.
Yeah. So I would say freshman and sophomore year of high school, I really kind of I kind of got what I wanted and it worked for a while. Like I was happy. I was invited to all the parties. I had all these friends. It was all just kind of fun and games. And then I started dating somebody seriously junior year. And it's like the mountaintop before the crash down. So yeah, I started dating somebody junior year and I always said like I would do so funny how you justify things in high school, but I was like, I'll do drugs and alcohol, but I won't have sex because that's really where things get off the rails. But ended up sleeping with him and then being incredibly depressed when we broke up. Well, and we broke up because I got so drunk I cheated on him. And that was kind of my MO. I was drinking. Honestly, it's amazing I did live. I was drinking so much alcohol on a regular basis. I would say 4 to 5 nights a week, straight liquor, and then smoking weed before school. So I was just a mess. I remember coming home one time from a morning football game, driving myself home, and I was completely drunk. And me getting home, my mom has suffered with chronic illness my whole life, or since I was very young, probably 4 or 5. And she had asked me to pick my brother up from church, and I was drunk, so I couldn't. So I just drove home with a friend. But then when she greeted me at the door, she was like, "You didn't get your brother." And then she smelled alcohol in my breath. And then, I proceeded to throw up for the next 12 hours. And it was like that kind of thing over and over again, right? It was like they'd catch me, there'd be conversations and consequences, and we love you. Why are you doing this to yourself? And that was probably most of junior year. And then by senior year, I really was suicidal. They'd found suicide notes. They had hidden sleeping medication from me. Like there was lots of just signs that like I was ready to be done with my life. And again, I was at Bible study yesterday and Bible study leader was like, Satan's so great at telling you God doesn't have a plan for you and God's holding out on you. And then as soon as you cross the line away from God's will for your life, he tells you, how dare you? You are not worth living. And it's like, that's exactly what, right? He was like, come do this, come have fun. God's holding out on you. God's not fun. You're missing out. So then, you cross the line and then he's like, I can't believe that. Your family's so ashamed of you. Like, and that is just how Satan works. He gives you half truths and then he'll shut you in a hole of shame so that you never get back to the life God had for you. So anyway, that was junior year and then start of senior year. So then senior year, spring break, we've actually started taking our kids on mission trips on spring breaks because I said, I'm not even dealing with spring break. I'm not doing it. Yeah. So, spring break, senior year, all my friends are going to Mexico with like a couple parents, but there was a big parent meeting for this trip. And my parents went to the meeting to like, kind of be like, well, let's see. And at the meeting, they're like, well, we're taking them to Mexico so that they can all drink because the drinking age is 18. So we just want them to have a good time. My parents were kind of like, what? No. So yeah. My dad was like, my dad was so great at, my mom too. They were so great at like, they didn't want to ever lose the relationship with me. So they really had to toe this very delicate line of like, there was consequences, but it was never the relationship that was a consequence. So my dad said, how about I'll take you and your 2 best friends. One went to my school, but one went to a different school. And I'll take y'all to Aruba. And my oldest brother was married. Him and his wife were coming. I loved them. They're always huge influence in my life. Both of them. She knew me from the time I was 14 until they're still married. So she's known me half my life. Anyway, so they were coming and I was kind of like, okay, fine. And my 2 kind of best friends were, I would say, decent influences on my life. Like I was probably a worse influence on their life than they were on mine. And, my parents knew that. So like, bring them with us. We went to Aruba. Well, of course, we snuck out because I was, again, just kind of how I did. And we went to Carlos and Charlie's. met boys, and then drove home. And my mom, when we walked in, my mom was on the floor praying on her knees when we walked in the door. And, I'm a teenager, right? I was like, gosh, you overreact. And then we get back home. Actually, the guy that I had met came back to the beach the next day. And my friend was like, go out with him. He seems nice. I was like, I know. I just get a weird vibe from him. I'm not going to go out with him. I don't, anyway. So I didn't see him again the rest of the trip. I think he emailed me once when we got home. Well, about a month later, my friend calls me that was on the trip with me screaming, turn on the news, turn on the news, turn on the news. I was like, I don't watch the news. Why am I turning on the news? We turned on the news, and there is the guy that I had met and kissed in Aruba as the suspect in Natalie Holloway's killing. And I was kind of like, what? Anyway, so she followed that case very closely. I wanted really nothing to do with it. And I just kept thinking about my mom on her knees the minute we got home from me meeting him. And asked her about it later. I was like, Mom, why were you like, I did stuff like this all the time. They were used to kind of my shenanigans, and not that they ever allowed it, but they weren't like ever surprised by it either. I was like,
interesting dichotomy there.
Yeah, right. And I was like, why were you praying, when I got home? And she said, the Lord woke me up and told me to pray for you. And I was like, oh man, it was very sobering, very sobering.
Pardon the pun, or maybe pun intended.
Yeah, I know. Both.
Wow. Okay. So, that's spring break senior year. So this is now kind of the arc of high school ending. And then we're off to college, right?
Yep. So then I head to Auburn again, despite so many of my parents' friends, telling that, they just I don't know how I would handle it now as a parent if one of my daughters was going through this. I'm sure I would have so much fear. But they, again, I also was very close in this time, like I said, to my oldest brother's wife. And she did a great job of kind of not being a mediator, but just telling my parents, like, there's hope. And I would listen to her way more than my parents. That's just a good plug for small group leaders, mentors, people outside of your kids need more than you. And I'm saying this to myself as well. But so anyway, went off to Auburn, and I kind of realized, I'm kind of the common denominator in all of this tragedy and trauma in my life. Like, I never felt like anyone was doing anything to me. I felt like I was the problem. Like, I didn't play the victim card, to my credit. I very much knew who was drinking, who was doing the drugs, who was like, it was me. I just didn't know what to do about it because I didn't really believe Jesus. Honestly, I didn't really believe Jesus wanted to save me anymore. I kind of thought he was like done with me. So then I go to college, and I kind of looked around and I was like, okay, so nobody knows me here. Nobody knows my family. I can start over, and I'm going to start over by, okay, well, I'll stop doing drugs and I'll stop sleeping with whoever I'm dating. That was I was like, that's I'll make my life like a little more PG. And so, anyway, so I say this in the book, I was not looking for faith. I was not looking for God, but I do believe he was looking for me. And my parents were also very aware of my just like slight change of heart. And I even told them I joined a sorority that was different from all my friends from high school. They all went one way. I went another way. So I was in a brand new group of friends. And I told my mom, I was like, I'm going to actually go, I think, to my sorority's Bible study. And she was like, you have to tell me to sit down before you stay, stuff like that. So yeah, that was kind of it. I was not looking for God. I wasn't attending church. I was not even dating Christian men at the time. I started dating somebody. We both were kind of like, what we're doing is not working. And so actually we both ended up at the Passion Conference. But anyway, my oldest brother, who's the worship leader, one of the worship leaders, he was leading at his first Passion Conference, which is a Christian conference for college students. And my parents were like, this is a big deal. It was his song he had written with, it's an old hymn that he had redone with a good friend of his. And they were like, he's going to be singing it. He was so supportive of me in the middle of my worst days that I was always like, if he was singing, I was there. And that's probably the only time I went to church, was to see him sing. And had many times that I felt like God was like asking me to walk towards him, but I was nowhere near ready to surrender my life. So I went to the Passion Conference and kind of like went through the motions of the conference, like attended. I was sitting with one of my sister-in-laws. 3 brothers are all married. And I was sitting with one of them, and I remember like, she's like worshiping, and I was just kind of like, this is kind of weird. And then I went to Beth Moore, and I felt like she was talking to me, as like anybody that's seen Beth Moore speak. Like, I think everybody feels that way about Beth Moore, but she was literally talking about the pit of sin and how God wants to take you to Psalm 40. I think it's Psalm 40. Lift you out of the pit, put your feet on solid ground, out of the muck and mire. And I knew, I was like, I'm in the pit because I jumped in here. I didn't even just fall. I jumped fully knowing where I was going. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to get myself out. I wasn't able to clean up my life. And I just kind of let that marinate. And then that night was the night my brother was singing Jesus Paid It All, of all songs. That was the song I was there to hear him sing. And I don't even know that he did another song that Passion, but he came on stage and he sang, and I was like, okay, God, I'm in. And I really just completely surrendered my entire life, my dating, my drinking, my everything, my future, my whatever. I was like, I just was so okay to lay it all down at his feet. And so, yeah, that was it was a very radical transformation. And then I had to go back to Auburn, which is an incredible school, but it's not a Christian school. And I had definitely not entrenched myself in a Christian world. So went back to Auburn and very much had to wrestle with my salvation, wrestle through, what did faith look like? What does surrender really look like? What does God ask of me as a 20-year-old? How do I date as a 20-year-old that has been, I'd never dated anyone that wanted anything but something from me. So anyway, there's a lot after that.
Hey, it's Mick. Real quick before we keep going, if this conversation is meaningful for you, do me a favor, tap subscribe so you don't miss the awesome stuff coming next. And if you've gotten even one insight from this episode, please hit the like button. It's a small thing, but it helps this reach more people who might need it. Last thing, think of one person in your life who would benefit from this. Just one. Share it with them right now. That's how this grows, person to person. All right, back to it.
Give us a sense for how you got to the point in that song, in that moment, where you're like, okay, God, I'm all in. Because you mentioned some other times where you felt like he was inviting you, right, to come towards him, and you were like, no, sir, not happening.
No. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the cooler things about a relationship with God is like, it's never forced. It's always an invitation. And I don't really know why my heart was open, except for that I had reflected enough on my life to know that I wasn't able to make it work. I looked around enough and I had gotten all the things I thought would make me happy, and I was still unhappy. I had dated who I thought I wanted to date, and I was brokenhearted. I had, gone to all the parties and I was still lonely. Like, I was just all the things that I was actually searching for. I knew I was not going to find. I didn't actually know how I was going to find them inside my relationship with God, but I knew I couldn't figure it out. Does that make sense?
It totally does. You essentially got to the point of realizing this is beyond me. I tried it, all of these different it's, and I can't fill myself. I can't create the love that I've been seeking. So I'll try God.
Yeah. Well, and really, Beth Moore was like the perfect tee up for the worship, because her message, first of all, it was out of such humility, and she was so honest about where she had been. And I think it's one of the reasons I wanted to share where I had been. Because when someone's really honest and they're broken and they're like, listen, I know what it's like to be in the pit. I know that you feel trapped in your sin. Because I think a lot of it too, when God's calling us out of something, it's not that we don't want to get out, it's that we don't know how. And I have very much felt that at some other, like, other times listening to my brother sing or attending worship stuff, I would feel like, yeah, that sounds great, God. Yeah, you want me, you love me. I don't know how to leave the life I'm living. And so I think the culmination of starting over at college and college just being really a fresh start for me. And again, I think this is where my parents were so wise and listened to the Lord over the voices outside of our house, because it did not make sense on paper for me to go to Auburn, but they felt such peace. And I don't know that I would have gotten to Jesus as fast as I did. Had I not been in that environment of just like, no one knows me, I get to start over. Who do I actually want to be? So yeah. And I mean, my dad says this still, like, we actually work together now, which is so fun. And we were talking together and he was saying, I was telling him about something going on with one of my kids. And he was like, Tindell, your convictions are not going to be your kids' convictions. And I was like, that really stinks. And it's true.
Yeah, right. Because you can look at your life and like, yeah, I did not do it the way you were convicted.
Right.
And now you're like, hey, I'm convicted of these amazing things. And, I do not want my kids to make mistakes similar or even remotely close to what I did.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So, but my dad knew I had to get to the point where these were my convictions, right? I couldn't carry a faith out that wasn't my own. I was willing. I mean, yeah, I was willing to surrender. I was probably broken too.
Yeah, I want to come to this point here real quick where, in the book, you said something that was just hilarious to me. You said, I didn't have a relationship with God. With the God I had talked so adamantly about, just an understanding of who he was in other people's lives. For me, God was a trend I followed until I turned 15, and then, like squirts, went out of style. Now, I laughed out loud as I heard that. You know what I mean? But I could also very much relate to that growing up in a Christian household, similar to yours, much less prolific in terms of what they, have done in Jesus, but nevertheless. And so now you're at this point of complete surrender. And you use the phrase radical transformation. So describe some of that for us.
Yeah. I mean, it was radical because, I mean, I literally, the boyfriend I was dating, walking into passion, we broke up, walking out. I mean, and it wasn't even, it was just like, we knew we were no good for each other. And he became a Christian and did great things. And, but it was just like, we both knew no. And then friends I was hanging out with, I knew they're not going to influence me in the way I want to be influenced. So it's like, and it wasn't that I cut off all relationships. I more had to move things to the outer circle. And honestly, I had to be lonely for a while. I would say I spent about a year of college praying for friends. And I was in a sorority known for partying. Like, I had joined a sorority that was very, very wild on purpose, because that's what I was looking for when I went into college. And so I had to figure out, I ended up being the chaplain and being in charge of standards, which is basically like everyone's mom. Nobody likes you. And my mom thought it was hysterical. I mean, she thought it was the funniest thing ever. But I was like,
the irony is thick.
The irony, right? Yes, so thick. I mean, God has such a sense of humor. I would walk into parties and people would lower their red Solo cups. I'm like, I mean, it was just, yeah. So radical in the sense of I was a completely different person, but also still just because I was a different person didn't mean I didn't struggle with all the same things. So then I came home from college and had to work through, God, are you really calling me to be sober? Because you drank wine and what's the line? And, so I had to struggle through, no, God doesn't want something from me. not even that. God wants something for me. He wasn't keeping me. He was keeping me from pain. He wasn't keeping me from fun. And so I had to wrestle with him and fail, which I talk about that in the book. Coming home from college was really hard because I was just back with all my high school friends. And I ended up going and living with my oldest brother at a Christian camp for the second half of summer because I was like, I can't be here. But I was so willing to do whatever it took to be faithful to God. I got back to college, started dating somebody, and realized like, this is still not going well. There's something I'm not getting. And then our pastor back at home, I went back for a weekend. Our pastor was talking about dating, and he was like, if you have been in a series of bad relationships, you need to take a year off dating. And I was like, oh, come on, God, a whole year? But I did. I was like, I'm going to take a whole year off dating. And then met my husband 6 months into the year. So didn't make it the full year. But those 6 months changed what I was looking for, who I was. I was willing to be alone. Like I didn't end up dating some people I probably would have dated. I was so okay not doing it my way because I knew it wouldn't work. So that was kind of the radical, and to be in college and to be asking God, what do you want from me? It's not an easy time to be doing that.
Yeah, I can fully relate to that. So, thank you for laying all of this out. And folks, there's so much more in the book. Like we're scratching the surface and it's all rich, and the depth in the book is just even richer. So you're 6 months in to your dating hiatus, and you see, I'll just leave it at that. And you take it from there. You see somebody. So tell us the story of meeting Ben.
Yes. So I had gone with a friend, and he knew very clearly we were just friends, to like a fraternity date night thing with a group of people. And while it was there, I literally just looked across the room and saw Ben, who's now my husband, and same thing, like locked eyes, which him and I are drastically different people, as God always does bring together. I'm like super extrovert, probably talk to everybody. He is an introvert, more reserved. He's an engineer. I'm a writer. Like we're just very, very, different. So the fact that we even met that night truly is a miracle. But I mean, his opening, I was literally waiting in line to the bathroom, and his opening line to me was like, long line to the bathroom, and I said, I know, right? And that was like how we ended up talking. And my kids love every time I'm walking to the bathroom, they'll be like, long line to the bathroom.
Oh, that's
they think it's hysterical because they're like, Dad, what a terrible pickup line. And he was like, I had never actually tried a pickup line on a girl. So we ended up talking, just like sharing life stories kind of that night. And then he called me and asked me out. This is the good old days where people still called you and asked you out. But he called me and asked me out the next week. We went on a date Tuesday and went to like a college ministry that we were both attending together. And then really the rest is history. Got married a year and a half later. But yeah, I did not tell him I was doing a year off of dating. And honestly, like I felt total freedom from God to not tell him that. And honestly, he probably would have been like, okay, that's fine. We can wait 6 months. But yeah, so we started dating, and he, again, very different story than mine. Only dated a few people, really loved the Lord from an early age and stuck to it. Not that he didn't have his own story, but so he had been praying for his wife. And then, when it was me, it was a little bit of a surprise, I think, because my story was so different than his. But he was so gracious, and our dating was honestly amazing. And I'm so, so grateful I had the time away from dating to know what I wasn't willing. Like I wasn't willing to compromise on certain things. And I mean, he wasn't either. So it was our dating story was just honestly a really incredible one compared to the other relationships I had been in.
Yeah. Tell us though, if you don't mind, about the the conversation that you and he
Mm-hmm.
have not that many months before the wedding,
Yes.
and
Oh,
things
yeah.
that had to flow from that. Because this is
Yeah.
real life.
Yeah. Well, and it's real life in the sense that you don't get to, I think it's a little crazy that everybody thinks, I'll just live how I want to live and then I'll clean up my life when I want to get married. And that isn't how it works, because you take whatever you had before into marriage. So when we met, yes, I'd had to tell him, hey, I have not waited for my husband. And not only that, like, I had to get an STD test before we got married. And there was just so many not complications. There was so many consequences to a life that I was so just ready to wash away and be like, yes, that's my past. But it came into my future, whether I wanted it to or not. And I mean, thank the Lord, my parents were so good I went to counseling. I did not just like kind of brush it under the rug and say like, okay, well, that's the past now, and I'll just never think about it again, because that wouldn't have worked. And honestly, writing Popular, I started writing Popular 6 months into our marriage. And that was incredibly hard and cathartic, because I kind of had to open up all those old wounds. I took journal entries I had always been writing, and I had journals from high school, and I had to take, I had to dig through all those pieces of my past and be like, what's still in here? Like, what do I still have stored in here that I need to get rid of? And so writing Popular was honestly a great way of kind of putting it all out on the table, and then being like, also closing the book on it and saying, okay, that is my past now. I am a new creation in Christ. This is no longer who I am. So yeah, there was definitely some not fun parts about, just, coming out of that season of my life, even though I really did believe God had made me new. You still are the same person, even if you are a new creation.
Yeah. And it's such a tricky way to explain that in a lot of ways, but I can 100% relate to that. So, let's just talk briefly here about what you framed up in the book about character, but also about how you began to look at love through the lens of 1 Corinthians 13, and how you seem to look at it completely differently than how you had kind of previously heard that scripture.
Yeah. I think honestly, my parents did a great job modeling unconditional love, like when I was growing up, because they loved me when I was my most unlovable, and they loved me without getting anything in return. And then when I was in the world and living that way, it was very much like your performance equals your love. So how you perform is the amount of love you get back. And then, yeah, it was like there's lots of transformations of love throughout my life, honestly. And then with getting married and meeting somebody who had to decide to love me, even when, I had the story he maybe didn't want. It just honestly gave me such great glimpses of how God loved me. And then honestly, becoming a parent, I feel like I experienced God's love in an entirely new way of being like, I love this child and they've done nothing for me. Like the minute I held them, I'm like, you're mine. I will love you forever. And I did when I gave birth to my firstborn. I remember God whispering to me, this is how I love you. And it was just, she had done nothing but cry. Right. And I just instantly was like, I would die for you. Like, so, he's done a great thing in giving me a new picture of love in each season.
Yeah. Praise God. Well, Tindell, we're going to land this plane here. I feel like we could spend hours talking, genuinely enjoying this. But we've got so many different pieces in here, and I'll just highlight, a handful of them. Your mom being awakened, awakened in the middle of the night with you in an incredibly precarious position, situation, etc. She's praying for you, right? You end up in a a sorority that has a lot more going on from the Christian standpoint than perhaps some of the other ones. And you just like, there's just so many different pieces here. And then even in a dating hiatus, you meet your now husband, right? And at a moment when or at a period in your life where you're very much maybe seeking God to some extent, right? He is there when you surrender. So many pieces. Are those coincidence or God?
Oh, I think they're 100% God. Honestly, there was never a doubt in my mind, or I was never skeptic of his hand in my life. It was just too clear. And again, I think I have said this to people before. I'm like, if you don't believe in God, just start writing your story. You will all of a sudden uncover little pieces that you didn't even realize. You know, it might have felt like coincidence, or might have just felt like, oh, how interesting. But they're not. Like, they are intentional pieces of God calling you home.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Tell us, how has your life changed as a result of all of this?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I would have any of the life I have had I not met Jesus when I was 19. I mean, yeah, marrying my husband would have definitely been out of the picture. But I mean, honestly, even just where we are with our 4 kids, getting to raise them to know and love the Lord. And again, that's their choice. And they have to decide their faith is their own, but just having a structure of knowing that this is something that is of the utmost value to me. And just I mean, I have incredible relationship with all my family. I'm very close to all 3 of my brothers, very close to my parents. I work with my dad. I mean, we really are like one big happy family. Like, our happiest time is when we were all together. And that is all God. Like, and our family story has been nowhere near perfect, even outside of my own. But God is a redeemer, and like, he redeems everything. So even years, you know, like my story, getting to sit here and talk to you, like, that is God's goodness, that he took something. I mean, I used to sign all my emails with Genesis 50:20, like, what you meant for harm, God is using for the saving of many lives. And God can do that. And I believe God can do that with anyone's story. All you have to do is be willing. I think he is always looking for people open to using pain for his glory. So yeah, there is not an aspect of my life I have now that I would have had I continued away from the Lord.
Well, I would say one final question for you, Tindell, because you're now more than a decade out from writing popular. Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned, the book was published when your oldest, who's now 13, was 6 months old, right? So lots of life has evolved for you, so much more experience now as a parent of 4 kiddos. So what, if anything, do you want to add based off of the life that you've led and the experiences that you've had post writing popular?
Yeah. I think all I would add is just like, maintain influence with your kids at any cost. And that, to me, when I say maintain influence, we actually talk about this a lot, my dad and I, but maintaining influence doesn't start with them following what you want for them. It starts with you choosing to love them no matter where they are. And so that would be, if I could just add an asterisk at the end of my story, it would be maintain influence with your children. There is nobody you will have more influence with than your children. And there is nobody who starts their story anywhere but, I was raised in a family that. So we all get to decide how they finish that sentence. We can't decide if they follow Jesus. We can't decide really anything else about their life, but we can decide how they finish that sentence.
Yeah. Wow. Really well said. Tindell, how can people get a hold of you in terms of your writing beyond just popular and the other work that you're doing? How can they stay up to date on all things related to Tindell Baldwin?
My Instagram's probably the best way. It's at Tindell Grace. I put writing up there occasionally, and my dad and I do a podcast actually every now and then together. So I put that up there whenever we do.
Once. And we'll make sure we link to the book so that people can get that as well. And we'll put all those Instagram handles and everything else in the show notes in the description. So really appreciate it. Tindell.
Thanks, Mick.
Thank you. Truly a pleasure. Really awesome to have you on When You Look. Thank you a bunch.
No, thank you. It was so great to be here.
Was it coincidence or God? You decide for yourself, but I believe you just heard a story for His glory. When You Look is powered by stories just like this, and yours could be next. Go to whenyoulook.com/be a guest or use the link in the description below. Be sure to drop us a like, drop a comment, or share this episode with somebody that needs it. And until next time, thanks a bunch for listening, and God bless.